Hello and welcome to another episode of All Things Money. I'm your host Fatima Attarwala. My guest today is Mehmood Nawaz Shah, who's a farmer and who heads the Sindh Abadgar board. So there's a lot of information out there on agriculture and what we have to say about cotton, about wheat, about sugar, about maize, about rice. All of that is public information, easily talked about, easily discussed. What I want to focus on today is horticulture, because we feel that horticulture has a lot of potential and not a lot of interest. Hello, sir. Welcome to the show.
Hi, it's a pleasure being here. Delighted to be here.
I am so happy to have you because as I said in my intro, we keep talking about wheat, and every time that I have a wheat story on my pages, it's about how there's a wheat shortage and how Pasco did not do what it's supposed to do. When we talk about sugar, it's always the same story. For years, it's been the same story, that the milling date was this, then the milling date was that, millers did this, the farmers did this, minimum price, that is a common. For cotton, we have the same story. There's not enough cotton, there are insects, pesticides, whatnot. Rice, we have exports, and then we have maize, which kind of just gets overlooked. What we don't really talk about is horticulture, fruits, vegetables, and as we were talking off camera, flowers, and how we might have potential, but we're not really developing it.
So I think it's music to ears that we are starting off with horticulture. Very seldom that I see or hear a lot of discourse on horticulture. Sometimes also misunderstandings on horticulture as well. Sometimes we are also overestimating ourselves as to our potentials and what we could do until and unless we properly gear ourselves up. So I think you very correctly said, while being 70% of our agriculture being the main crops, and all our attentions are driven towards we farmers wanting the prices to be better, wanting there should be subsidies, and government saying IMF and World Bank, and all the discourse that you see is going from here to there just on 5 major crops. But generally speaking, I think what we are ignoring in agricultural economy generally is the horticulture. And why do we say that? And very rightly you put up, we say that, but a couple of reasons. First, just to start off that while having a lot of opportunity, not that we could only grow more, we are currently growing about 13 million tons of fruits and vegetables. And by the way, the farm gate value of that is about $3.5 to $4 billion.
Wow.
And out of that, 35 to 40% we waste.
That's hundreds of millions of dollars.
So it turns out to be close to $1 billion of wastage. So there will be obviously certain wastage.
I'm sorry, I am interrupting you. You are saying that the amount of an IMF tranche we are annually wasting in produce?
It's not, yeah, absolutely. Those are the official numbers. But when you are producing certain fresh commodities and produce, there will be a certain wastage, but not of 35 to 40%. That is not the only lost opportunity. The lost opportunity is also when you're not processing it, you're not doing value add, you're not sending it to markets of value, then you're losing your value that would multiply the numbers. And perhaps you're looking at least very conservatively north of $1.5 billion in horticulture with very low yields and production. We're not talking of increasing yields as of now. I'm just talking about whatever crops, fruits and vegetables primarily that we have. Coming to markets, let me just reflect on the markets. The place where Pakistan is sitting and the strategic advantage that we have with CPAC, unfortunately for last 15, 20 years, and I think even today, there's a lot of focus on getting funding on roads and buses and power plants and all those things, right?
Yeah.
And then we cry that we have to return that money. Why should we be returning? And then we talk here and there. But we haven't, for the last 20 years, focused. Is there an opportunity where we could tap the market of China and beyond, which is OBAR, One Belt, One Road, which is 40% of the world GDP. Now, if you would look at those countries, including China, are essentially those countries where all the horticultural things that we produce, tropical stuff that we produce, are required there. 1. 2, fruits takes 5 to 6 years, but all the required vegetables could be grown within 5 to 6 months. The turnaround time is so short. And unfortunately, we haven't done much of work. So as to say, the kind of opportunity that we have is essentially immense. This will not only add jobs, create employment, but it is also small and medium-sized businesses which could flourish all in the rural areas, and kind of our focus of commodity-based agriculture in Pakistan would change to certain value-added agriculture. Let me give you an example of Vietnam. From 2006 to 2016, the horticulture exports increased from $300 to $400 million, what we are doing it right now, to $2.2 billion, just in 5 years, or just in about 10 years. And they were hoping to increase it to again to $3 and $3.5 billion. And guess what? More than 50% of the market is China. So the point is there are immense opportunities, but they come with challenges. They're not without challenges. So absolutely rightly and correctly you put it in your intro that this is something which is an ignored sector in agriculture and so important.
When we talk about Vietnam, we quote similar statistics. It was behind us in textiles, and now it's one of the biggest textile exporters in the world. Apparently, the same thing is happening with horticulture. We have, as we said, rice, maize, cotton, wheat, and sugar. Why are our small farmers, medium-sized farmers, large farmers not shifting to horticulture?
What is the problem in horticulture? Let me give you just an example of this year. Vegetables, farmers say, is like gambling. Why do we say that? If you would look at the prices in last 2 years, so they would sometimes be high and sometimes be very, very low, to an extent that you're not even able to get a harvesting price as well.
I know, I've had stories on my pages about how people just leave the produce on the side of the road because the cost of transferring it to the mandi is too high.
Absolutely. So we focus a lot when the things become expensive, and perhaps there's an understanding that rural economy is benefiting from very prices of, for example, 500 rupees a tomato, right? But nobody talks when it becomes 5 rupees a kilo a tomato. So last 5 to 6 months, whatever, 90% of the vegetables that we produce in Pakistan have had very low prices, 5 to 6 months. So there's just one example that I'm giving. Why farmers don't do it is essentially because the area, if you put under it, would certainly crash the prices. There will not be buyers of vegetables, and therefore for farmers it's a very risky business to do it on a scale. Until and unless you have a proper processing capacity, proper export strategy in place, then perhaps you could have a scale and you could do it. Perhaps that is the place where our government, developmental agencies have to look and find out what you could grow, what could value add bring to it, and how could this scale be increased. So 70% of agriculture is looking at millions of hectares of land. Out of that, even 2% of conversion into horticulture will land into a situation where there won't be any buyers, and farmers suffering huge losses on that count. So that's the problem that we have.
Because we do not have enough demand within the country, it has to be exported.
It has to be exported.
And when we talk about exports, we talk about standards, international standards, packaging, and like we were talking off camera, the fruit has to look beautiful. Nobody wants to eat a mango that is misshapen.
I think we just forget, we keep on hearing and talking how good of a mango that we produce. But if you go to European Union, for example, and including UK, where you're sending your mangoes for ages now, ask any commercial buyer. I'm not talking about wet markets in Spitalfield out of London and those places.
What are wet
but
markets?
Big supermarkets. Sorry?
What are wet markets?
I mean the sabzi mandis of this world, right?
Normal
where our
vendors,
fruit goes. But for what I'm saying is, for example, supermarkets where there isn't any footprint of Pakistani mango. People would tell you that there is a mango out of ABC countries, but there isn't any mango coming out of Pakistan, such of our prime crop and produce. So to answer your question, ADB, and I keep on telling people, because people would say, I mean, from what the hell Mehmood you was talking about. So ADB did a study in 2019, and they said we're producing about 13 million tons of fruits and vegetables, but the cold store capacity is just about 990,000 tons. So now imagine the kind of difference. World has moved on from cold stores to moving on to controlled atmosphere storages. And it is not a robotic science and complicated things. This is a now 25-year-old science. We being an agricultural country, we do not have a proper temperature control infrastructure in place. You spoke very correctly and rightly of the certifications, standards, food safety, environment, employment. All those things are really important to get into markets. Let me give you an example. We tend to be very happy when a new market opens. So China, here comes the China free trade. We signed China free trade with all the fanfare, and we also sat. But has somebody asked in the last 3 years down the road, are we able to export any horticultural produce out of Pakistan? The answer is no. The question then again is that we do not have the things that they eat, or we aren't able to cater to market. And you'll be getting back to the answer that we do not have a pre and a post harvest technology. As you said, to take the fruit as it looks good to eat. People tend to eat with their eyes and not with their tongues, and so therefore pre and post harvest infrastructure, having proper logistics in place to take things in time, proper certifications in place, handling at port to be able to do it, and then again general facilitation. Now just imagine these things are to be put in rural areas. I mean, I get amazed when people say, oh, it's a 6-hour load shedding. So in rural areas, we are experiencing 12-hour load shed for last 5 years. The maximum electricity available is 12 hours. So if we're asking somebody to put up a certain infrastructure in place, so he's not only calculating the costs of electricity, he has to put up generators, add something to its solar, so the capex, cost of doing business just skyrockets. So all these things need to be in place to really harness horticulture and the kind of opportunity that we have.
And as you were pointing out, most of the farmers in Pakistan are very small subsistence farmers. They eat what they grow. They do not have the funds to spend hundreds and thousands of rupees, more, millions of rupees in setting up a solar network and everything, and then build the market for it.
So one of the reasons why farmers continue to produce the commodities is at least it sells. Wheat doesn't sell at 4,000, it sells at 2,000. Doesn't sell at 2,000.
Somebody will buy it.
You can consume it, but not with the vegetable. Vegetable is if there aren't any buyers, you have to it basically rots, or you're giving it to animals. That's how it is for the horticulture. And you look at generally in Pakistan as well. While the inflation has been so high in last 2 to 3 years, but there has been a deflation in the agricultural commodities, and government not wanting the prices to rise, and that is appreciated because we're looking at consumer side also. But we cannot forget that if the input prices continue to rise, how would both ends could be met? So that is something which needs to be looked at also. Curbing exports, putting curbs on exports, allowing exports at a certain date, not allowing exports at certain dates. These are all issues which build into a lag which is created in horticulture sector. Why don't people invest so freely in horticulture?
Also creates a cycle of poverty, because if there's deflation in the rural economy, and the rural economy is what's contributing to employment, and they are the ones facing lower prices rather than higher prices, while input costs are rising. So generation after generation, you have families of subsistence farmers. They cannot break out of this poverty trap.
So I think what we have to understand that commodities are important for Pakistan. For food security, we are not saying not to produce wheat or rice. What we are saying is that if you focus on horticulture like yourself, it's going to create a rural employment as well. It's in small and business categories in different areas that you could do. For example, generally a pack house, a cold store, a grading facility, logistics. These are all places where you create a lot of employment for rural areas, and that is something for which otherwise, for example, a B and a C category of mango sells for 15 rupees, you'll be selling it for example, 250 rupees if you could add value. And out of those 250 rupees will all be the employment that will be generated. A transporter that transports it will be also benefiting out of it. So it will be a dependence getting out of commodities and then benefiting the small farmers also. Internationally, if you would look at India, there will be small entrepreneurs who would have a 1 acre of land, 2 acre of land, but he'll be perhaps running a combined harvesters. I would have met so many people who'd be running a combined harvester, doing his own couple of acres and doing it for somebody else as well. So he could be a machine operator and while continue to also do his own agriculture. He'll be a very skilled labor to harvest mango the way it is required, to treat it properly pre and a post harvest way, and the way it is required internationally, and could continue to also do his couple of acres. That's how you create a certain a balance and such an opportunity, as you said, to also raise the rural our marginalized farmers as well.
So one opportunity is exports. Let's keep exports aside because you have to match the standards. Different regions, I'm assuming, have different standards. What about value addition within the country? I mean, apple jam, mango jam, ketchup, all of these require horticulture as inputs. So why is the value addition not happening within the country beyond the corporate farmers and the Nestle's and the PepsiCos who are growing whatever fruits and vegetables required with their certain select farms, which happen to be large farms and not small farms?
What I've seen is also that our landscape is such that, for example, take tomato. So we think a tomato is a tomato, and I was saying it somewhere that the same question, that why is it that we're still importing tomato paste, and the other side is saying that it's going to waste, and I said that's a different kind of tomato, and somebody ridiculed me and say, yeah, Shah Saab is a nice person, but then a tomato is a tomato. What is he saying that there's a different tomato? I said, tomato is perhaps today one of the things which is being debated, whether it's a fruit or vegetable. It's red, it's purple, it's this size, and it's a bigger size, all for different occasions. Same goes for onions. There are onions for salads, there is a pungent onion for cooking. We were not able to differentiate those. What PepsiCo did in Punjab is essentially bring in a potato for French fries. And see, your question is absolutely to the dot in a sense, and in looking at import substitution, for example. So yeah, there is an opportunity to import substitute and potatoes where we're doing and making French fries. Tomato paste, where I think National Foods and some others are working hard to create a certain value chain, and they're trying to do it, again coping with lower prices, energy issues in rural areas, which increases the prices. So we could do a lot of value import substitution in certain crops that we could, for example, onions, we just eat fresh, but then, for example, in very high prices, you could have an onion powder that could be used, dried onion that could be used for our local production, dried fruit which could be used for our local production as well. But then these come with a lot of marketing costs too. And then the point is that requires a certain policy focus where people around the value chain will have to work together to create a long-term plan. And that is essentially, as farmers, we keep on saying needs to be created. It will not be created automatically just by opening market XYZ and saying that we will be able to export. This will not happen. And you absolutely correctly said, fresh food on one side, and in tandem goes also the value add. That's how you create synergies in fruits and vegetables.
And the onus of all this, who does it lie upon? Because a small farmer will not have the understanding that this tomato can be sold, and he would not have the supply chain either. So who should be, which government body, should it be provincial, federal, all the stakeholders? Because so far, as you mentioned, like Nestle works with dairy farmers to ensure the milk is of the quality. We talked about PepsiCo. In India, McDonald's, because India was not, this is a whole case study that India was not allowing the imports of the potato required. I think the russet, something they're called, for the long French fries. So they had this entire value chain created in India so that those potatoes can be grown. But again, the efforts that are being made by the FMCGs in Pakistan, they work with large farmers, the kind of farmers who can afford to invest and train. The small farmers, the 90% plus farmers in Pakistan are small farmers. What can we do for them to move out of wheat, which we know will be sold at whatever price, but at least they know they'll have something to feed to their family, and maybe shift them to mangoes?
So what we have seen, for example, in a potato value chain, if you would look at it, it will not be only the largest scale farmer who benefits. But what we have to understand is that initially the beginning will be done by at least a medium-sized farmer. Again, in Pakistan's landscape, we talk a lot about either cursing the large farmer or talking, pitying a small farmer. And then we're not talking about some people who are in between as well. So there are people in between who would want to work. And if you are trying to do something new, take a little bit of risk, or trying to talk with someone to produce something which has not been produced in Pakistan, I think that is where a farmer with a little bit of scale would only work initially. Once the model succeeds, so what will happen? The prices of commodities will become better. There will be markets. Once those two things happen, the small farmer will benefit. Let me give you an example of banana, for example, in Sindh. Banana is one of the crops today which is the highest revenue earning crop today in its own shape, with very bad things that we spoke about, but it still does. So you would go and beyond Tando Layar, Mirpur Khas, Matiari, Tando Mohammad Khan, even small farmers are doing banana, which they were not used to do 10, 15 years. Because then people with scale did it, they become successful, markets created, certain logistical infrastructure created. Now you have small farmers also doing banana. So I think it will not be an automatic, direct, or a very crudely saying trickle down per se, but I think a medium-sized farmer or large-scale farmer will be the one who will be taking a step forward, and then it will benefit the small farmer. We have to be, I think, very mentally prepared for that. Last 50 years we've been doing everything for the small farmers. All the World Bank programs, ADB programs are for small farmers. What have they done?
Nothing.
We are unable to do it. They look good, women farmers and all that, and all
They're
these
all token,
cliches
symbolic,
that we create.
yes.
And once the program is finished, 90% of the program just collapse there and then also.
Yeah.
Because there aren't any proper commercial models created for it.
You have to follow
So
the
you
money.
cannot-
There's not a long-term
Yeah.
sustainable profit angle without any institutions involved.
Cannot,
it won't work.
It cannot be a stigma, me saying, oh, I'm talking because I'm a vested interest, and perhaps I am, but being an into organization, we essentially look at the interest of the small farmers, and we have to talk the truth. Maybe it looks so, it may not be politically correct to be talking about. I mean, medium-sized farmers is an elephant in the room. How come you're talking about it? It's a part of the problem, it's not a part of the solution. Very frankly, we have to move on from that discourse to make agriculture sustainable.
Even if we continue to have the discourse on small farmers, as you point out, what has that discourse done? It's all walk and no talk. It's all talk and no walk, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So right now our model is you have a small farmer. He has 4 sons. When he dies, that little plot of land is going to be divided in those 4 sons. Then they die, it's going to be. So right now we are stuck in that cycle. As you pointed out, if the medium farmers can demonstrate to the small farmers that if you upscale, if you're progressive, if you value add, then maybe that small farmer can become a medium-sized farmer. But the question is, what financing and policy changes can be made to ensure that those small farmers become medium farmers in the longer term?
Yeah. See, let me put, as a layman, and I don't know how pragmatic will this be to say it in Karachi, but I said it in one of the pre-budget meetings in the PDM government. The current Prime Minister was also Prime Minister in PDM government. And I said, does it harm if the government throws in 8 to 10 billion rupees annually into horticulture sector? And saying this is the incentive that we have, and you could create any financial model that you can create a debt equity model, you can create whatever model, and then you say anybody doing and value addition into horticulture with proper value chain, all these sticks, that the money will be available. And I said, is it a lot of a fiscal burden that we're talking about? And everybody said, yeah, we should do it. And I think in the first year they did, but then again that window was closed. So I think the policy, first and foremost, is to understand that government is, for example, right now talking to Saudi Arabia to invest in all those, and I was invited in one of those, and I got a call from the Pakistan's trade minister in Saudi Arabia, and they were just targeting the largest 10 buyers, and I said, I'm not one of those. I'm not even close to those. So they said, yeah, but this somebody from Saudi investment asked to talk to you. So I said, they spoke to me and I told them 2-3 things. And I said that this, while you could continue to focus on large companies, but try to understand that this horticulture value addition that we're talking about is in all small and medium-sized businesses. And somehow you have to create a policy space for them. Now, what that policy space means is, first of all, is to creating a space so that a finance is available to those projects. But nobody is coming to invest into this. Then when I talk a lot about opportunities and we speak, and then people say, why don't you invest, And that's a fair question. And I always say, well, we try to do something that's a story for a different day, but if you want people to invest, what you have to understand that in Pakistan today, doing a new business is not easy, especially if you're doing into agriculture, especially if you are trying to create where a lot of marketing effort is required, marketing investments are required. Mango pulping, for example, 50% of that market share is with India. While it would be easily you could see that there is a potential, but what you don't understand, that when you take your mango pulp, the buyer says that I'm selling my mango pulp to the confectionery, to the ice cream makers, to the juice makers who are used to having Alfonso. I mean, Scenery would be a very good mango, but what if consumers don't like it? So what it requires is a certain marketing push. What it requires is reducing the risk. What it requires is for the government to do a certain hand-holding. What it requires is the policy to have electricity available and energy available in rural areas, which is viable to produce all those things. You are harvesting mango at 45 degrees Celsius, but you have to keep mango pulp, even aseptic mango pulp at a room temperature, ambient temperature of 25 Celsius. Just imagine the kind of electricity energy required, and you are putting all the your working capital in 40 days, but you're selling it in 12 months. So that's the kind of risk that you are taking. So this is one example of one value add that you spoke about. So that is where the policy, the hand holding, your attention. So if we are going to China, meeting all the great people, but we haven't asked them, okay, that this is an opportunity. By the way, China, being a great friend, is buying a lot of mango pulp out of India. Why aren't we able to create a certain value chain for that? By the way, sesame, for example, a recent opportunity. Why aren't people creating a factory and not to take sesame as raw and then take sesame paste? So is it difficult? But you ask those investors and they would say, oh, your policy, this is what one of the Chinese person said, oh, your policy in Pakistan changes so often, the power sector, energy, it becomes really difficult for us to invest. So when you ask of policy, it cannot be one size fitting all for all the horticulture. I always say, in my humble opinion, we have to find out what are the 5-6 crops or horticultural crops that we're talking about. Is there an opportunity? Is there a market? What value add is required? Why aren't the businesses of this world doing what they're not doing? And then slowly and gradually filling that gaps up, creating a certain document, and then going to Saudi Arabia and China saying, this is the document we have, it's a very profitable business, and these are the gaps that we found out, these are the gaps that we have filled it out, anything added required, we are at your service, come and do the business.
Ease of doing business and policy continuity is, I think, all the sectors
absolutely
agree on. It doesn't matter
hit the nail.
Textiles or banking or cement or agriculture, ease of doing business and policy continuity is always the two that pop up. But right now, as we were discussing horticulture as one sector, but I imagine what it takes to create, to produce tomatoes and turn them into paste versus what it takes to grow mangoes and turn them into pulp. Those are different processes and different investments. So if Pakistan was to choose say 5 fruits and vegetables, 5 fruits or vegetables or flowers, what 5 would you recommend?
So I think we have onions which are quite surplus, we have potatoes that are surplus.
So basically focus on the ones our farmers are familiar with
Absolutely, but then you have to be very cautious as to, it's not just asking farmers to grow potatoes. Which
potatoes?
variety are we talking about? Is there variety available to the farmer? At what cost is that available? Is there any buyer who's ready to buy? Is there technical expertise to be able to grow? Because you just cannot bring it out of Netherlands and start growing it here. So all those things require hard work to do it. Same goes for tomatoes as well. And there's so much of so people would say, in Italy there is some very complicated name of a very good dried tomato that you eat. Why aren't we doing it? Sun-dried tomato. So the point is that tomato that we have, if we are sun drying it, it's music to ears because you're sun drying it, but do we have a technical expertise to do? Name one who could do it and who could buy at a price XYZ. The answer is absolute no to all these things. So to answer your question, potatoes, onions, chilies, and with it we could grow so many other vegetables, cauliflower, cabbage. But the first step, these three are the main, where even within Pakistan there's a lot of demand of these and the value add of these. Then in fruits, I would say we already have mangoes in quantities. We have quinoa, we have banana, and then in northern areas we have apples that could be really taken care of. I'm sure a couple of more could be added to this basket. Don't take it from me as an expert, but as a farmer and somebody who belongs to the grower organization and looked at those things. I think a roadmap needs to be created. It can be different to what we are perhaps talking about, but then where is the alternate roadmap as well? What we are doing is we're putting the cart before the bull. We go and get the market, but do we have things to market those produce to take it to those markets? The answer is absolute no.
And you pointing out the China FTA, that's what happened with the China FTA, not only for agriculture but for other sectors. We promised to export goods that we were not manufacturing, and we got tariff reductions on exports that they had no use for, which is why the China FTA flooded our markets with Chinese goods, but we were not able to export anything. So if we were to make a policy, we would need to, on the government level, decide on say 5 to 10 fruits and vegetables, understand what the markets are internationally and locally, what varieties are needed, what are the soil conditions, what are the fertilizer conditions, where do we get the seeds, what pesticides are needed, and do the farmers have the technical knowledge to grow them?
I mean, just talking about the policy, you'll be surprised. At least I was. For last 2 years, they asked me to attend a meeting of Ministry of Commerce where a very senior person sits, and they talk about that mango export date needs to be changed from 20th May to 25th May. So they said, what is your opinion on this? So I said, I said, I'm surprised. I mean, all the senior people are sitting here. I am free. For me, time is not an issue, but I'm just talking about 5 days difference of allowing export date. I think that's too much of a time, energy that we're doing. And right now, this year, what they did, they have fixed the export date as 1st of June. And I said, what is the reason for that? Because scenery doesn't mature at 1st June. I said, this qualitative intervention by the government through this regulatory measure is counterproductive.
What is the purpose of that?
The purpose of that is because someone wise has said that since the scenery doesn't mature before 1st of June, so we tend to send mangoes which are not properly mature, therefore they don't ripe, therefore they're not sweet, and it creates a very bad name in the market. So I said, okay, fine, if you're doing it in 1st June, there is still mango which is immature in northern Sindh, in the middle of Sindh. What if I start exporting those mangoes on 1st of June? So I think by doing 1st June, spending so much of time, and in our view taking, a decision based on what logic, you are also subtracting the Seri and the Siroli varieties, which are the early varieties which mature in May 15th and 20th. So what I'm trying to say is that our energies, our time and effort, I'm sure with all the sincerity that people sit and decide, is going where it should not be going. It should be somewhere else. What our exporters this should rather be inculcated and perhaps sermoned that we need to export mangoes when they are mature. Not through administrative measure by saying that 1st of June, before 1st of June you cannot export.
But shouldn't the decision
That never
of
helps.
when to export lie with the farmer who has the crop and has better
Absolutely.
knowledge? Like, I mean, what's the point of the government intervening when there are so many different mango varieties being grown in different parts of the country?
And in Australia, they exactly could calculate when would mango mature by looking at the sunlight time and the kind of sunlight time and temperatures required. So they could predict. I won't say it's an exact science. In Pakistan, we do not have it. And then also we decide on dates. I think nowhere in the world are those dates decided because the thing A, B, C is mature or not mature, and to allow exports or not to allow exports. With a very so the purpose of giving this example is to essentially pinpoint the kind of energy and effort is going where it should not be going. It should be rather something else that we should be talking about, brainstorming as to why is it that our mango is not going to China. Let's talk about it. Whether we could do it. Is taste the problem? Is flavor the problem? Or we're not sending it properly is the problem.
So we have a very strong feudal system in Pakistan. We have a lot of landlords sitting in the government. Wouldn't it be in their self-interest as well to shift away from, say, sugar towards horticulture?
So that has become rather a weakness for us. I was just talking to a farmer yesterday, and we were just complaining, right? But then who is the majority sitting in all the three honorable houses of Pakistan that we have? It's our community that is sitting there. But have we heard any progressive conversations on things, debates on these things? Unfortunately, absolutely, and there isn't any. Whether things should be coming and pushing, a lot of pushing which should come from there is unfortunately not happening from there.
Again, why? I mean, we have so many floods and so many droughts in Pakistan. It is their farms also being affected. There should be self-interest in having climate change management techniques and measures put in place. So why is that not happening?
So I think I have at least seen, for example, very sincerely in the province and in the federal government, same goes for Punjab, people would be trying to do it sincerely. But somewhere if it happens, for example, the committees of agriculture or food security, they do not have an executive authority. I know that bureaucrats go there just to give them answers after an hour and a half and come back and just give them answers because they do not have an executive authority to do it. It's just an advice which keeps on going to them and they're not taking, they're doing whatever they want to do it, and that's what they are.
The entire policy framework and structure, how they're made and how it's faulty all along the line, even with the best of intentions.
So even of the things that we discourse on, for example, deregulation of sugar and deregulation of wheat, which is not the topic today, perhaps for some other day, we have created a mockery in last year and a half to even to those. Just imagine of the things we are not even talking about. So the things we talk about is not, we do not have a proper handle and policy. Forget I agree or disagree is immaterial. But even there we are creating a mockery, and I can give you example. It will be such a waste of time for this program. But then just think about horticulture, where nobody is talking about. We are destined to be not doing anything and creating value in the horticulture sector because no one is even focusing about it.
But again, what kind of water requirements does horticulture? Is it more or less? I mean, sugar is extremely water intensive, rice is water intensive. We are a water stressed country. How does horticulture fit into that?
So let me first bring into the focus that the kind of water that we use, forget rice, paddy or sugarcane, even otherwise. In today's sense, we are utilizing about 95% of Pakistan's fresh water. With an increasing population, we have me coming from agriculture. People don't like it, but I say that what we need to understand that any additional land coming for agriculture today is counterproductive, because the kind and quantum of water that is being utilized, even for drier crops, if you would say cotton is the largest quantum of water that we are utilizing. Our productivity is one of the lowest. We are producing 0.13 kgs and we're producing
Of
about
cotton.
0.13 kgs of grain per cubic meter of water.
Okay.
India does 0.33. Now these are all things given, and if you would say where should we be focusing, it will be more in a water's discourse. It should be more towards productivity of water than we spending energies on whether it should be in a storage or a canal. You know, okay, continue to talk about that, but then where would the efficiency and productivity of water, who would talk about it? Just take example of India. India has converted their close to, I think, about 13 to 14% of land to high efficiency irrigation systems, and we have not even reached 0.25 or 0.3% of our land to high efficiency irrigation systems. So yes, while we should be looking at crops which are water wise, absolutely correct, but then even in total agriculture scenario, we need to be utilizing less water. Horticulture, generally speaking, consumes lesser water than the crops those are. So even water wise, with the same baseline that we have inefficient utilization of water, horticulture is not something which would take more water. Either it will be same or less.
So when we talk about water, there's a whole lot of water politics. Which province, which canal, whether it's lined, whether it's not lined, who gets the water, the upper riparians, the low. So the entire politics of water, when you account for that, perhaps that is what's reducing the efficiency of water.
Yeah, so I think there would always be, political people doing politics with it. Sometimes it is very easy to talk about something and everybody gets provoked, flared up, and suddenly the focus changes to that and everybody's talking about it. So I think that one aspect is there, but on a serious note, water is very important, not only intra-provincial, but even basin-wise, looking at from whether Pakistan is getting their resources from, whether it's Afghanistan, China, or India, and we are not able to, unfortunately, have a strategy today in place where all the 4 provinces of this country are agreeable. 1, 2, while sitting in Karachi, it's always important to talk about is that Karachi is perhaps the last city on the Indus Basin, and it gets one of the most polluted water here. And I always say it, that why isn't it that we talk a lot about on the quantity of water, which is also very important, but we're not talking about the quality of water, and the lakes that we have, aquifers that we have, and how we could improve it. We're not, unfortunately, talking about that. When the Sakhar downstream is 0, I ask, what is the water people are drinking downstream Sakhar? And it is quite a few days when the downstream Sakhar or downstream Kotli is 0. And number of days where the downstream is 0 is increasing day by day. Again, we need to be very careful, serious, and about water, and create a strategy, a long-term strategy essentially for water, which is missing.
When you talk about water, we have water scarcity, and then again we have floods. But insurance generally, be it life insurance or auto insurance, the penetration is not very high. Crop insurance is another topic that we need to be covered in detail, as well as to what can farmers do, because they have small farmers. There's a flood, they lose all their crops, they lose their land, and then they come back. Sure, then the land becomes more fertile after the floods, but how do you compensate for the loss of crops in the flood in the first place?
Yeah, so it's also good to talk about climate change. It looks so nice, and in the scenario of climate change, crop insurance is so important. In Pakistan, I've been hearing about crop insurance now for the last 20 years, and I think in the shortest of answers is that for commercial companies to make it commercially viable, it will only happen if the government takes a certain side of the costs and the premiums, and that's how it is now. There's a lot of detail to it. There have been a lot of efforts which have happened in past and have not succeeded because of very high premiums that are there. In US, for example, even today when their markets are very mature, 50% of that costs are taken up by the government. So there is not only crop insurance, but in US, for example, you can do a revenue protection also. For example, I'm growing cotton, I'm growing corn, and I could have a insurance. If the prices are to go down below a price X, then I'll be able to get certain returns from the insurance. Also, at the end of the day, what I have seen is there's quite a bit of I think what we forget is that insurance, when companies come in, there's a cost to it, and that cost is quite substantial. Doing something new which is very risky, it becomes even more costlier, and therefore I think bearing that bills even for small farmers, it is I think difficult. A starting point could be at least where the agriculture credit is given, perhaps even if that part of the loan is insured would help. But even there, we haven't seen a lot of successes.
It's all very well, and I'm sure you're right when you say it's the government's job. But at the time where the petrol prices are sky high, record high, the government just had a price hike of the petroleum development levy. So, I mean, it keeps taxing the people rather than having. It does not have the resources to stop taxing
I think
the
that's
people.
it's
so to expect it to have a crop insurance program, but it cannot even decide which horticultural product to produce. I mean, that's.
Yeah, I think one thing is that in Pakistan, all the productive sectors are being put weight on. That could be a 45% taxation rates, for example. You talk about levies. So all the productive sectors who are the taxpayers, there's a lot of burden on them. You talk about crop insurance, but even agriculture credit, for example, is not available for agriculture. If you would look at our $65 billion farming and agriculture economy, but the agriculture credit available is I think about 2.8 trillion rupees. So I think it's about $1 billion worth of agriculture credit that is available. And if you would look at those categories, that includes poultry and other things. So that's more on the value add side than exact farming practices in agriculture that you do. So therefore, if we are not even able to provide agriculture credit to our small sized farmers, the demand and the need of, as the small farmers is increasing, unfortunately, if we are not able to cater to those people, then expecting to have a robust credit and insurance and financial landscape for farming is pretty much far-fetched and not practical today. But I think this is something which people should be talking about.
Should at least be long-term planning, if not the medium-term planning. So if I were to just wrap it up, we have the budget around the corner and we have the conflict going on. If you were to give, say, 3 policy recommendations to the government for the upcoming budget that could provide some relief to small, medium, large farmers in the upcoming budget for the next year, what would it be?
So I think first and foremost recommendation would be if certain financial resources are to be kept, I think horticulture sector would be the one where the financial resources needs to be kept, but then they should be tied properly with the technical expertise availability, with joint ventures and viable projects, and small and medium size, not large, where big companies, people flying in their jets coming in, will not help agriculture. That's one. Number 2 aspect is water, and water efficiency and productivity. US, India, China will not increase and enhance until and unless if there is a government hand-holding into it. And they need to focus, create and hand-holding not only on-farm water productivity, but having technology at the water distribution side also to create certain fairness, where a small and a large, a farmer at a tail end and a farmer at who's right at the top, and there is certain governance which is created through technology. So I think water, horticulture for me are 2 primary things where government should focus on.
Water and horticulture, if you're pointing those out, are we talking about investment and spending, which again there's a limited budget, or are we talking about increased awareness and passing on the knowledge rather than, which might have a less of a drain on the budget?
Yeah, so horticulture, I would say, is, as I said earlier as well, it's not, we're looking at not maybe creating a window with a 10 to 15 billion rupees saying this is a debt equity model that we have, and this is the kind of debt that the government will give without any interest, and the businesses could establish their businesses. And so that is the kind of interventions that we're looking at. But of course, it should not be a free money in the long term, but it needs to be an investment from the government side, and we need to create a certain focus. But believe me, public sector is spending much more than the quantums that we're talking about. It's just a proper focus that we have to create.
So if I were to sum up the main crux of it, there's a lot of symbolic ventures, especially with the multilateral partners, be it women entrepreneurs in the farming sector, be it small farmers, but nothing sustainable. The measures that need to be taken are those that once the government steps back, the small and medium-sized farmers should be able to continue in their own stream. It's only then that we can see transformational change rather than a drain of resources that produce no results. And in that way, the two main policy interventions should be water and horticulture.
Yeah, so government has done something good in Punjab and Sindh, where the most of the farming is. Here, for example, they have developed this, is called a Hari card for small farmers, and it is absolutely correct that the subsidies need to go to small farmers and marginalized farmers. Unfortunately, the only problem is that it's only 330,000 farmers, whereas at 2025 Agri-Census, where we have 96% of our farmers are small, the depth of this program is much less. It needs to be more. So programs like this to sustain marginalized farmers is very important for the agricultural economy in Pakistan. While sustaining small farmers and then creating a strategy for value add, those both can go together. Unfortunately, like you said, of multilaterals, and everybody loves to talk about small farmers and women farmers and so on and so forth, creating certain programs which do not have a long-term sustenance. And one is not even able to talk, because then it is not a politically correct statements that you're making in sitting in panels and doing certain presentations. But I think we have to see and understand that these are the experiments that we have already done. We have to sustain our small-sized farmers first, and then the medium-sized farmers also, to make our agriculture more vibrant and robust, I think. And there is an opportunity to do it.
Basically, the intervention should not be symbolic, be it women farmers or small farmers. They should be something that are sustainable, so that once the program ends.
Yeah, and practical as well.
Practical, yes. Great. So thank you so much for coming on the show. It was lovely having you, and I think this is a conversation that there are many aspects of which need to be covered, and I hope to see you again so that we can cover the many aspects.
Thank you, ma'am. It was a pleasure being here.
It was a pleasure having you.